Hey guys, it's Dylan and this is my 50mm lens. I've had it for actually 2 years now and it's time that we talk about it. So for those in the photography business, you might have heard of this lens. This is the Yongnuo 50mm f1.8 and that is such a mouthful. This lens is actually quite famous because this is a clone of Canon's 50mm f1.8 but at a much cheaper price point. Right now, the website I'm referencing to is Macy's Camera Shop, which sells that for around 6,000 plus. And 2 years ago, I just had this for 2,600, and I'm pretty sure it's still at the same price point now. So if you guys plan to buy this lens by the end of the video, I actually have a link down in the description box below, and that goes to Lazada. That is where I bought this lens. Now, before I go into the proper review, just let me say that this is not a detailed, comprehensive review of all the things that this thing has to offer, but rather I'm just gonna talk about my personal experience about this lens. I am by no means a professional photographer, so my views on this lens might actually differ from those who actually shoot weddings, debuts, and whatnot. I am just a guy who owns a 600D. So I'm going to tell this review in the perspective of that person who doesn't have any experience with full frame cameras, who just has an entry-level version of a DSLR and seeks to step up his photography game and videography game through buying a 50mm lens. So let's talk about this guy's build quality. Number one, it's cheap, and that's because it is. Remember that you're only buying a 2,600 priced lens compared to its Canon counterpart, which cost around 6,000 pesos. Now this thing is made out of just cheap feeling plastic, and the kit lens is actually well built compared to this one. So like I said, this thing is actually made out of plastic, but in turn it makes it more lightweight, and that's the only upside to that. It makes it easier to carry around compared to other lenses, and lenses get really heavy. This one doesn't because it's plastic and there isn't any moving parts because this is a prime lens. I honestly feel like if I drop it, I'm going to lose this forever. I'm going to have to find a replacement, but for the past 2 years, I actually haven't dropped mine. So yeah, just take good care of it. Next, let's talk about focusing. Now, I've actually used this camera mostly for portraits and just still moving objects. I've used it on some dancers a while back, and I actually felt its shortcomings. This thing is actually slow when you're focusing on some moving objects like sports photography or, like I said, some dancing subjects. But when your subject is just still and it doesn't require much movement, then this is actually good. I wish I could just show you guys how this thing focuses so you can determine for yourself, but it's just that I don't have an extra camera to attach this one. So yeah. Next, let's talk about the bokeh. Now this thing is actually really great when you're transitioning from the kit lens down to this lens. This is actually great because at 50mm it offers f1.8, and on the kit lens it actually just offers f5.6 at max, and aside from turning up your ISO way up and making the image more noisy, it actually blurs the heck out of your background, which in turn gives it a more isolated subject. I actually have two samples on the screen right now. The left one is taken with an f1.8 lens, which is this, and the next one is stooped down at the f5.6. So that's the difference between those two apertures. Though as you can see at f1.8, this isn't that sharp. When I was a beginner, that doesn't really matter for me. Sharpness isn't one of those qualities that I'm looking for when I was just a beginner. I would just like to use a lens that gives me fun, just be out there and shoot whatever with a 50mm lens. At that time, I didn't care, but as I progressed to this film journey, this cinematography, sharpness did matter to me. But that's not my deciding factor whether or not I take good videos or good photos. It's all about the composition in your head. Video was my primary usage for this lens, and photography was just a side dish, and that is where it mattered because there is no image stabilization in this lens. So if you want that buttery smooth panning shots, you either have to use a glide cam or a Zion crane or some gimbal of some sort to have that smooth shot. Now I'm just going to flash some videos on the screen with some settings that I've used to pan shots. So when I pan a shot, I actually use this technique where I just pull out the strap and go and pan. but as you can see, it's still jittery. So what I usually do is I stoop down to 720p and shoot at 60 frames per second, so that will smooth out the process. It's just that you have to sacrifice the 1080p quality. Now, who would I recommend this lens to? If you're like me, who is just a hobbyist videographer and photographer who doesn't have any budget for expensive equipment, then go for it. I would highly recommend this lens. Don't worry about sharpness, just enjoy the bokeh. You will learn over time. This lens will help you learn. If you're like me who just wants to take photos on vacation with your friends or some gatherings with your family and some Instagram stuff, who doesn't want to take this thing professionally, then you might just want to consider buying this lens. It's loads of fun and it's cheap as well. But if you're a professional photographer who shoots weddings, debuts, and other events that this creative field would have you hired, then you might want to reconsider, because there are some shortcomings that you have to face with this lens. It works, but you might see some setbacks. And that's it for this video. And on the topic of film and photography and videography and whatever, I actually have a dedicated channel for that one. It's linked down below, or if I could, I'll just put somewhere here on the screen. And that's basically for this video. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you dislike it, that works too. And see you on the next video.